My name is Emily Robertson, and I'm 29 years old. I reside with my father and mother. Our family has always stuck together as a trio since my early years. Growing up, I've always admired my dad. He's the epitome of hard work, running his own bustling business. Though his schedule keeps him away from home most of the time, whenever he finds a moment, he dedicates it to me. On his off days, he prioritizes spending time with me, proving himself to be an exceptional father. My mom, however, paints a different picture. As far back as I can recall, she has never been employed. While she tends to household matters, she's never lent support to my dad's business or pursued a career outside our home. Despite our comfortable lifestyle, with my mom often seen socializing and attending events, her lack of involvement in my life has left me feeling somewhat neglected. There were moments of profound loneliness, but my dad's unwavering presence always filled that void. He understood the indifference my mom held towards me and made his mission to ensure I never felt neglected or alone. As I grew older, my mother's tendency to break promises became apparent, while my dad's commitments were steadfast. My mother's casual approach to promises left me disillusioned. I learned not to hold her pledges in high regard. Conversely, my dad's reliability and trustworthiness garnered my admiration. I even entertained thoughts of joining his company after graduating from university. Being the only child, I saw it as a way to honor my father's legacy and continue his work. Upon reaching my mid-20s, my father began imparting invaluable wisdom during our outings for drinks. Meanwhile, my mother's involvement in my life remained superficial. The only time she interjected was during my sophomore year of college when I expressed my desire to join my father's company. "Dad, I want to work at your company after graduation. I'm already preparing for it. I want to follow in your footsteps someday," I announced eagerly. "Emily, are you sure about that?" My mother intervened, her words dripping with traditional expectations. "A girl doesn't need to pursue such endeavors. Why not? I want to work hard like Dad," I insisted. "A woman should find a good man and let her husband provide for her," she countered, echoing typical sentiments. Disheartened by her lack of understanding, I chose not to engage further. I refused to live a life tethered to someone else's ambitions, mirroring my mother's existence. I had always aspired to become an independent woman, determined to navigate through my college years on my own terms. After that pivotal moment, I dedicated myself to diligent study, paving the path to join my father's company immediately after graduation. Though my mother remained unconvinced, it seems she eventually resigned herself to my decision. "If you choose to live this way, so be it, but remember, you'll bear the consequences of not heeding your mother's advice," she remarked resignedly. "If you're willing to accept that, then do as you please." So I followed her directive by stepping into my father's company, inadvertently widening the chasm between my mother and me. Conversely, my bond with my father deepened as we spent more time together. Reflecting on it now, I realized my mother wasn't pleased with the turn of events. Upon joining my father's company, he invested considerable effort in my training, which, unbeknownst to me, was driven by his declining health. It took him nearly half a year to acquaint me with the intricacies of the job before he collapsed at our workplace, swiftly whisked away to the hospital. Over the next 5 years, he valiantly battled his illness. "Emily, how's the company faring without your dad?" my mother inquired, her concern veiled by skepticism. "It's challenging, but everyone's rallying behind me. Dad entrusted me with everything I need," I replied confidently. "Well, as long as that's the case, just ensure you don't leave the company to ruin as the second generation," she cautioned, her words tinged with apprehension. "You lack any genuine interest or affection for the company. You're merely preoccupied with others' perceptions," I retorted, disheartened by her lack of faith. During my father's illness, our disagreements were frequent. Despite his weakening state, he made sporadic visits to the company, emphasizing its significance. "These employees in this company are invaluable treasures to me, but I must relinquish my hold on them," he confessed, his voice laced with emotion. "Emily, I've witnessed your dedication over the years. I trust you to safeguard this place and everyone here." "I don't know if I can emulate you, Dad, but I'll strive to uphold your legacy," I pledged solemnly. From that day forth, the mantle of leadership was bestowed upon me. With my father mostly confined to the hospital, my days were consumed with the company's affairs, leaving little time for homecomings. I prioritized visiting him regularly, carving out time amidst my busy schedule. My mother, on the other hand, fulfilled only the basic duties such as delivering changes of clothes to him. Even that seemed to inconvenience her. I couldn't help but wonder about her feelings towards my father. Did she lack any sense of gratitude or compassion for his illness? The thought left me feeling sorry for him, recalling the sacrifices he made for me during my childhood, a time when my mother's affection remained elusive. Despite my exhaustion, I made a concerted effort to visit him as often as possible, a routine that persisted for about a year until he peacefully passed away in his sleep. Amidst the whirlwind of tasks that followed, I barely had a moment to grieve. My mother, oblivious to my emotional turmoil, expected me to handle everything from funeral arrangements to hospital paperwork. Realistically, I knew I couldn't rely on my mother, who had never ventured beyond the confines of our home, so I silently assumed responsibility for the myriad tasks. The day after the funeral, my mother broached the subject. "Emily, now that the funeral is over, you've settled down, haven't you?" she inquired with a heavy heart. "I've just inherited 200 million yen, so I have no use for you anymore." "Thank you," she declared, as though it were a mere formality. Her words stung, but I had anticipated them. Further discussion seemed futile. Did she truly believe that wealth could replace familial bonds and absolve her of responsibility? With a multitude of questions swirling in my mind, I made the decision to depart the next day. I arranged for the sale of all belongings associated with me, leaving my mother utterly surprised at the speed of my departure. I had meticulously planned my departure, but I harbored a secret from my mother. Despite her claim of inheriting 200 million yen, my father had entrusted all financial matters to me, designating me as the sole inheritor. Not a single yen remained for my mother, a decision my father made adamantly while he was still in good health. "Your mother lacks the understanding of money management or prudent spending. I want you to provide her with monthly household expenses," he instructed me. "If she receives a lump sum, she's likely to squander it immediately. If she protests, refuse to give her a penny." Though my father's last words were spoken in jest, he handed me an SD card containing a video message addressed to my mother. While I never envisioned showing it to her, recent events suggested its necessity might arise sooner than later. After my departure, I anticipated my mother would reach out to me, but her summons came sooner than expected. "Come home immediately," she demanded over the phone. "I'm working, Mom." "What's the matter?" I replied, feeling a pang of annoyance. "I just need to talk to you." "Please come quickly," she insisted. With a sigh, I reluctantly headed back to our family home, clutching the SD card in my hand. As soon as my mother laid eyes on me, she launched into accusations. "You absconded with all of your father's inheritance, didn't you? I knew something was amiss when you left so abruptly. Hand over your father's inheritance to me now," she demanded, her greed palpable. "How selfish can you be? You can't even fulfill your duties as a mother," I retorted, my frustration simmering. In response, I silently extended the SD card to her. Confused, she inspected it. "What's this?" she queried. "I suppose you don't even know how to watch this," I remarked, masking my disappointment. I retrieved my laptop, inserted the SD card, and played the video on the screen. My father appeared as vibrant as I remembered him. I couldn't help but wonder how my mother would react to this video letter. Silently, I exited the room, leaving her to watch it alone. I had never witnessed my mother defy my father before, but now, in the wake of his passing, would his words resonate with her? Upon returning to the room, I found my mother in tears, her emotions laid bare. I was taken aback, my mother shedding tears over a video of my late father. I was intrigued by the contents of the video letter he had left for her, but hesitated to watch it myself, consequently remaining clueless about the cause of her tears. "Mom, are you okay?" I inquired, concerned, lacing my voice. "Yes, I'll be fine. For now, I understand. I'll adhere to your father's wishes and entrust everything to you from now on. Please go home for today. Call me once you've had time to gather yourself," she replied, her tone subdued. Sensing her desire for privacy, I left promptly, pondering over how my father had managed to silence my mother. Questions swirled in my mind as I made my way home. Nearly a month passed without any communication from my mother, prompting concern to grow within me. During my lunch break one day, I decided to pay a visit to my parents' house, hoping to check on her. However, she wasn't home that evening. I returned once more, relieved to find the lights on. "Sorry for dropping in unexpectedly. I came by this afternoon, but you weren't home, so I grew concerned," I explained upon seeing her. "I'm sorry, I was out for my part-time job during the day," my mother explained. "A part-time job?" I echoed incredulously. My understanding of my mother painted her as someone vehemently opposed to work. How had it come to this? "Didn't you watch that video?" "It was a video letter addressed to you," I retorted, baffled by her sudden change in behavior. "You can take it home. You should watch it too." "Emily, can I watch it?" I asked, extending the SD card to her. "Very well," she acquiesced, passing it back to me. Feeling a twinge of apprehension, I returned to the office and settled at my father's desk. With a deep breath, I played the video. "Honey, if you're watching this, it means you've not been able to communicate with Emily. First of all, thank you so much for helping me raise Emily until now. Without you, I don't think I could have managed the company while bringing up Emily." My father's voice resonated through the room as his words continued. A sense of unease crept over me. Then he uttered something unexpected, something that shook me to my core. "You've taken care of Emily even though she is not your child, and I have nothing but gratitude for you. You've stood by my side for so many years, but as a result, you've given up on your dreams and have reached your age without earning your own living. For that, I take responsibility because I have allowed you to live a life of luxury. I'm sure you'll be in trouble when I'm gone. I'm not my mother's child." I blurted out, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. But then it clicked. Despite the lack of overt affection, she had cared for me every day, doing the bare minimum for a child who wasn't her own. Who was this person? "I didn't register a marriage because you told me you felt bad for your sister, so I ended up supporting your living and didn't do anything else. I'm sorry, but once I'm gone, I worry about the rest of your life. There's no one to support you, and I've taken your life away." I sat in disbelief as my father spoke, his words flowing with unexpected clarity. It was all news to me, his concerns, his regrets, his hopes for our future. Throughout the night, I grappled with the weight of his revelations before confronting my mother the following day. "Mom, I watched the video from Dad yesterday. You know it all now," I began, my voice laced with a mixture of confusion and realization. "I raised you because I was asked to. That's all," she confessed, her tone heavy with the weight of untold truths. "What happened to my biological mother?" I pressed, seeking clarity amidst the swirling chaos of newfound information. "You were the child of my sister and your father," she explained somberly. "My sister died right after giving birth to you, and I promised your distressed father that I would help raise Emily. I would become your mother." With her revelation, everything fell into place, even the parts I had previously only imagined. I learned of my mother's sacrifice, how she had set aside her own dreams to fulfill her promise to my father. I recalled how my mother used to work in a diner, her vibrant spirit and dedication palpable. Her dream had been to own her own diner. Yet when she chose to become my mother, she shelved that dream. However, inspired by my father's words and prompted by the memory of her deferred dream, my mother made a decision. She resolved to reclaim that dream, embarking on a journey to pursue it once more. Currently, she is undergoing training as a part-timer, determined to turn her dream of owning a diner into reality. I should have done this earlier. Working is fun and suits me. I had no idea. So it's my fault you didn't work. I'm really sorry for not knowing anything," My mother admitted, her tone filled with regret. "It's not your fault, Emily. I made the decision myself that I'm not good with children, so I couldn't handle you well. I'm the one who caused you trouble," she continued, taking responsibility for her actions. As we conversed, I realized it was the first time we had such an open dialogue. At this stage in my life, I finally felt like I had come to understand my mother a bit better. Our conversations became more frequent, leading us to a decision to use the money left by my father to fund the opening of her shop. Once she started working, my mother became somewhat more humble. She hesitated when the topic of funds for the shop came up, a behavior that would have been unimaginable not too long ago. While maintaining my regular job, I also assisted with the opening of her diner, bringing me into frequent contact with my mother and fostering a newfound relationship between us. Regarding living expenses, she insisted on managing them with her own income, refusing to accept help from my father's inheritance. "Promise that you'll tell me if you're struggling. After all, Dad trusted me to take care of you," I urged her. "I'll be fine living on my own. It doesn't cost that much, but in terms of my diner's expenses," she trailed off, her determination evident. "I'll be relying on you, of course. I'm looking forward to it too, so do your best," my mother encouraged, her eyes filled with hope and anticipation. After many years, we finally became a real family, and now we are living harmoniously. She isn't my birth mother, and perhaps it was just the right time for me to learn this truth. Your diner is finally going to open tomorrow. Your dream is coming true, I remarked, filled with pride as I watched her dedication. Seeing you work so hard at that company reminded me of my own dreams when I was younger. I believe that's why I've made it this far. It's all thanks to you and your father. Thank you so much, Mom. I expressed my gratitude, feeling a deep sense of appreciation. Promise me to always be my mom, Emily, she implored, her voice filled with sincerity. From now on, let's get along even better than before. After all, we only have each other, I replied, feeling a newfound sense of closeness. Upon my father's death, the truth was revealed, and I accepted the reality of our situation, deciding to live on with just my mother and me. I contemplated moving back to my hometown and living together with her again. I don't cook, so my mother is concerned about my poor diet and is supportive of me coming back, I explained, feeling touched by her care. My father would probably be surprised that we're getting along so well. His company and inheritance that he left behind. I'll protect them at all costs while continuing to get along with my mother in order to become a real family, I vowed, determined to honor my father's legacy. We visited the graves of my father and my biological mother, my mother's older sister, to give our daily life updates. After going through the process of adoption, I finally became registered as my mother's daughter, forging a bond that transcended bloodlines. Hello, today I want to share a story from my life about how I almost lost $755,000 to my thieving and manipulative in-laws. Thankfully, I knew my way around and managed to get it back, but first, let me introduce myself. I'm Emily, and I'm 40 years old. I'm married to the love of my life, Jack. Jack and I met back in college. We had the same elective and got paired together for a project. With every meeting, we realized how much we liked each other. After the project, we continued to hang out and soon began dating. Our relationship was very smooth. We had similar personalities and meshed well together. One of our biggest shared values was our love for our families, which is why about 6 months into dating, we introduced each other to our parents. Jack's meeting with my parents went well, but meeting his parents wasn't the best. Jack's parents, Robert and Elizabeth, were very closed off. They didn't try to get to know me or show any interest in what I was saying. By the end of dinner, I was beyond embarrassed. Imagine telling a joke and having no one laugh, just staring at you blankly. That's exactly what the entire dinner was like. When Jack dropped me off at my place, he apologized for his parents' behavior. He explained that they were apprehensive about him dating in college because they wanted him to focus on his studies. I felt like that was a valid reason, so I let it go. About 3 years after we graduated, Jack and I got married. We waited until we were financially stable and settled to tie the knot, which was a great decision because being able to spend without worrying about the future is a blissful form of security. After we got married, I noticed a change in Elizabeth and Robert's attitudes toward us. They had been cold to me up until the wedding. When I told them where I worked during a conversation, I held a good position at a well-recognized bank, which must have piqued their interests. Suddenly, they were a little more open. However, this openness came with something ugly. They would make crude remarks at my expense whenever Jack or I said anything about it. They'd brushed it off, telling us to lighten up because they were only joking. Jack and I aren't very confrontational, so we just stuck with it. Then came the requests for money. I come from a low middle-income family, so I knew what struggling looked like. The only people who helped my family were other family members, so when my family asked for money, I never said no. It started innocently with Elizabeth needing money to pay off a ticket. She hadn't brought enough money and asked me to bring some over. I helped her out and never asked to be paid back, and she never made an effort to repay me either. Then they started purposely forgetting their wallets at home or not bringing enough money whenever we went out, expecting Jack or me to cover for them. Eventually, they straight up asked us for money. We were spending more money on them than on ourselves, so Jack and I sat down to discuss things. You know, I love your parents, but we can't keep giving them money and covering for them like this. I said, yeah, I wouldn't have any issue if they weren't working individuals who make more money than us. Jack agreed. I just don't know how to bring it up. It feels wrong. I feel the same, but we can put that money to better use, like buying a house. I suggested. You want to buy a house? Jack asked, surprised. Yes, I've always wanted to own a house, I replied. Me too. Jack said, we'll have to stop enabling my parents and live frugally to save quickly, but it will be worth it. Oh my God, are we doing this? I exclaimed. Absolutely. It's been a dream of mine to own a house with you, Jack said. Jack and I started saving the next month, putting aside more than half of our pay towards savings. It was initially a struggle because we were used to certain comforts, but we quickly adapted. We also had to talk to Robert and Elizabeth about not giving them money anymore. Needless to say, they were not happy. Elizabeth bluntly asked Jack if I was the reason for this change. Jack told her it was a joint decision and explained our plans to buy a house, hoping it would get them off our backs, and it worked like a charm. However, they did stop contacting us as much. Jack and I didn't let Robert and Elizabeth's lack of contact bother us. We focused on our work and saving as much as we could. Of course, sometimes we dipped into our savings to finance something big, but overall, we stayed committed to our goal. We got right back on track with our savings and didn't let that setback get us down. In about 2 years, we had saved up around $76,000 in our joint account. We were overjoyed and shocked by how well we had done. One weekend, Jack had been avoiding me all day. I was concerned that something was up, but every time I tried to talk to him, he went silent or said it was nothing and walked away. I gave him the entire day, but by evening, I sat him down for a serious talk. Okay, I've given you time to figure out what's wrong. You need to tell me, I said. There's nothing wrong, Jack replied, trying to deflect. I'm going to stop you right there. Both you and I know that's a lie. Spill, please. Don't be mad at me, he hesitated. What's wrong? I did something really bad, he said. Oh no, what did you do? It's okay, you can tell me. I won't get mad. I gave my parents the money we had been saving up for our new house. What? Why? They called me yesterday morning and said they had a lot of medical bills and other huge debts. They made me feel guilty about having so much money, so I gave it to them. I wanted to help them out, you know. Oh, sweetheart, I don't know how to feel about that, but if you stand by your decision to help your family, who am I to say anything? Well, that's the thing. I really regret my decision. Why? I was scrolling through Facebook this morning before you woke up and saw this post my dad made about them going on a luxury cruise they had always wanted to go on. Here, look, I was panicking. I didn't know what to think. How could Jack do this to us? More importantly, how could Robert and Elizabeth do this? We had been transparent with them about our struggles. Jack had opened up to them a lot about it, and they had given him advice on how to save money. Seeing them openly declare their luxury cruise on social media, thanks to us, felt like a slap in the face. I made it worse for myself by checking our joint account balance. There was just $1,000 left. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My mind went blank. Almost all the money we had saved over the past few years was gone. All the years we lived frugally felt wasted. I couldn't be mad at Jack because he truly thought his parents were in serious need, but seeing them spend it on a luxury vacation was something I couldn't stand. Jack looked miserable, and while I couldn't be mad at him, I also knew I couldn't easily let this go. He knew his parents had a history of tricking family members out of their money. Usually, it was a small enough amount to forgive, but $75,000 was too much. I grabbed my keys and drove to his parents' place. I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight, but I was determined to get our money back. Once I parked in their driveway, I took a couple of seconds to steel myself for the confrontation. I walked up to their door and rang the bell. Elizabeth answered. "Oh, what are you doing here?" "Who is it, honey?" Robert called from inside. "It's just Emily," Elizabeth replied. "What's she doing here?" "Just ask her." "Emily, be quick. We don't have time for you because you're too busy spending our money," Robert said, approaching the door. "I told you she'd be here for the money," Robert said. "Look, Jack gave it to us fair and square," Elizabeth said. "Only because you tricked him," I told them. "We did not," Elizabeth insisted. "Yes, you did. You lied about having to pay off huge medical bills." "It wasn't a lie. We really did have a lot of debt, but we cleared it all out. I'm glad we could help. Now fork over the rest of the money. It was given to us, so we get to decide what to do with it," Robert said. "Yeah, could you do us a favor and not disturb us again?" "Thanks." With that, Elizabeth shut the door in my face. I was stunned. I tried ringing the doorbell again and even banged on the door, but they ignored me. I sat back in my car, fuming. I started the car, reversed out of their driveway, and drove around until my anger calmed a little. The audacity that Robert and Elizabeth had was shocking. How could they not feel bad for robbing their own child by tricking him? I remember how miserable Jack had looked when I left, so I drove back home. By the time I got back, a good couple of hours had passed, and my phone had died pretty much as soon as I had left the house earlier. When I walked into the house, I saw Jack pacing back and forth in the living room, looking beyond worried. He didn't notice me, so I cleared my throat to get his attention. He looked up in surprise before running up to me and hugging me really tight. "Oh my God, thank God you're safe. I was so worried," he said. "Why?" I asked, taken aback by his intense relief. "You disappeared 4 hours ago, and your phone was unreachable. You didn't respond to any of my texts either. How could I not have been worried?" Okay, that was bad of me. I'm really sorry." "It's okay. I'm just glad you're safe." "Where did you go, though?" "Your parents' house." "My parents? Why?" "To ask them about giving us our money back." "Oh, Tina, I'm so sorry." "Shush, I get where you were coming from, but you need to have your wits about you." "Yeah, I will." "Did they give you the money back?" "Nope." "Oh yeah, remind me why this isn't making you freak out." "Because I have a plan to make them give back our money. Is there any way I could help?" "Oh yeah, definitely. This plan rides on your help." Jack had a friend who worked with the income tax department, and I worked for the bank where Robert and Elizabeth had their accounts. All I needed was a letter from Jack's friend to freeze their accounts. I would love to see how long Robert and Elizabeth would stay away from me after they could no longer use their money. Jack's friend owed him a huge favor because Jack had used his connections to help his friend get his current job. Jack called him up and explained the whole situation. His friend was more than ready to provide a letter ordering the freezing of Robert and Elizabeth's accounts. I got on a call with him the next day at work and provided him with all the necessary details of Jack's parents' accounts. We went over the letter together, and he told me that I would get it in a week. That timing was perfect because it was right before Robert and Elizabeth were set to go on their cruise. Since their cruise was all expenses paid, they probably wouldn't even notice that their accounts were frozen. With that extra time, I could also work on filing a case against them for lying and stealing from us. I knew that Robert and Elizabeth would contact me when they realized their accounts were frozen. I would use the case as leverage to get them to pay me back in full. A week later, Robert and Elizabeth left for their cruise. They made sure to send Jack a picture of them on the ship, rubbing salt in the wound. Jack felt beyond upset when he saw the picture, and if I'm being honest, it made my blood boil too. But I knew this would just be further proof of their crime when I filed the case. When they finally got back, Jack and I felt our excitement creep up every day as we waited for a phone call from his parents. It took about a week before they called. "Hi, sweetheart." Julia's voice was overly sweet. "Sweetheart," Jack echoed, confused. "Did you hit your head somewhere?" "Don't be silly, sweetie." "Of course I didn't, although." "Yes, there it is. What's wrong?" "Don't be rude, but yes, Carl and I have a bit of a problem." "And why do I help you out? Did you guys ask me not to disturb you?" Jack's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Tina, please," Julia begged. "It's a matter of our survival. Our bank account is frozen for some reason, and since you work at our bank, could you look into it for us?" "I'll think about it," I replied coldly. "Please, we're begging you to somehow unfreeze our accounts. We don't have much cash on us to last us through the week." "Oh, that's tough. Anyways, I'll see what I can do." I hung up the call, feeling a tingle of sick satisfaction from Julia and Carl's desperation, but my plan wasn't done yet. I was going to string them along for a while before revealing the truth. I wanted them to feel the anxiety and betrayal I had felt. The next week, Jack mostly ignored their calls. When he did pick up, they asked for money, but he always coldly said no and claimed he was busy. I carried on as usual with my week. Julia called me every day to check if I had any information on how to unfreeze their account. With each passing day, I sensed their panic rising. Somehow they managed to survive another week. By the second week, I began to ignore their calls altogether, only answering occasionally to tell them I couldn't talk at the moment. It was satisfying to play with them as they had played with us, but eventually I got bored of the games. So I told them I had information for them. They eagerly invited Jack and me over to dinner at their place. All of their rudeness and mean attitude were absent. Suddenly, they were super nice to me, even prioritizing me instead of ignoring me like usual. Jack and I struggled to contain our laughter at their pathetic attempt to seem nice. After dinner, I pulled out a folder containing the information from my bag and set it on the table. Julia and Carl looked at me nervously. "Oh, what did you find out, dear?" Julia asked. "Yeah, will we be able to get our account back?" Carl added. "I don't think so, at least not for a couple of months," I replied. "Wait, what? Why?" Julia exclaimed. "The funny thing is, I completely forgot I had done this when you were on your cruise," I said with a smirk. "What are you talking about?" Carl demanded. "I had your account frozen," I revealed. "What? Are you mad? Why would you do that?" Julia shouted. "That's what you get for manipulating your son and stealing from us," I said calmly. "You're a monster," Carl yelled. "No, you guys are the monsters. You knew just how much owning a house meant to Jack. You knew how hard he worked to earn that money. You knew all the sacrifices we made, yet you stole from us. How many times do I have to tell you that you did lie? Just because you've embellished the lie doesn't take away the fact that it was still a lie. Your account will remain frozen until you pay us back in full," I insisted. "We'll take you to court," Carl threatened. "I dare you to. I've already filed a case against you. If you don't pay us back in full, I'll push for the case, and then you'll have to do more than just pay me," I retorted. "How can you do this to your own family?" Julia pleaded. "Oh please, Julia, don't even try. We're giving you guys a month to figure it out and give us the money," I said firmly. With that, I grabbed Jack's arm, and we left. As soon as we sat in the car, we burst out laughing. We had done it. The look of shock and betrayal on Julia and Carl's faces was so worth it. They would know never to mess with us again. Jack tried to apologize to me again, but I assured him that it was all okay. We had ensured we'd get our money back and, in the process, given his parents a taste of their own medicine. I don't know how or where they got the money, but Robert and Elizabeth paid us back a week after that dinner. I was beyond happy. Elizabeth texted me politely, asking me to unfreeze their account, which I gladly did the next day at work. Jack and I spent the next few weeks finalizing our new house and moving in. We went low contact with Robert and Elizabeth. We got fooled once, and it would be embarrassing if we let them fool us again. We're both people who value family and tend to have a very soft spot for them. Robert and Elizabeth knew this, which is why we couldn't let them use it to their advantage again. They also never actually apologized for what they did, so we didn't want to be involved with them until they did. Jack and I are living happily in our beautiful home. We're even planning to start a family at one point. In my life, I really thought that I had to resign to my fate, but this experience taught me that if you take things into your own hands, life will go your way. Jack and I made sure to set firm boundaries with Robert and Elizabeth going forward. We loved them as family, but we couldn't let them take advantage of us again. It was a hard lesson, but an important one for maintaining healthy relationships. A few years down the line, we did end up having children of our own. As grandparents, Robert and Elizabeth shaped up and treated our kids wonderfully. Though the betrayal would always sting, we eventually found a way to move forward as a family, while keeping firm boundaries in place. This whole experience taught me the value of standing up for myself, even against my own family if needed. I'm grateful Jack and I got through it together as a team. Our money issues only made our marriage stronger in the end. We learned that with hard work, determination, and supporting each other, we could overcome just about any obstacle life threw our way. I'm a 37-year-old office worker, and my husband, Robert, who is 8 years older, and I have been married for 11 years now. Due to some reasons, I'm living with my mom. Let me explain how I ended up in this situation. 4 years ago, Robert and I built a house. At that time, Robert had just changed jobs, and we didn't have much money saved or a big income. Robert used to work for a big company, but he faced constant hidden bullying from his boss. This caused him sleep problems, and eventually, he couldn't go to work anymore. He saw a psychiatrist, took a break for about 3 months, but when he didn't get better, he quit his job. After that, we got by on just my salary. Robert didn't work for 3 months, but slowly started to feel better. He began eating and sleeping well again, and his psychiatrist was pleased with his quick recovery. My cheerful, loving Robert was back. He then started looking for a new job. His experience at the big company helped, but finding a job was hard because he left his last job due to mental health issues. During this time, we found a small company that needed him. The salary was about a third of what he used to make, but he was happy to be working again. He said it was much better than being without a job, which made me happy. This job was also in the field he wanted to work in. We wanted to have children, but it was clear that life would be tough if I stopped working, so I continued working. I also loved my job, and we decided not to have children at that time since it was just the 3 of us. Our life was peaceful until my mother, Sarah, was paralyzed in a car accident and needed a wheelchair to get around. My dad had passed away when I was in middle school, and Sarah had been living alone since then. Our family home was old and not suitable for a wheelchair, with many steps. Robert then said, "I'm worried. Let's live together." Sarah and I were surprised, but I appreciated Robert's unexpected kindness. Since Robert had just changed jobs, we were unsure about the future, but we decided to apply for a mortgage. As we expected, it was tough to get a loan because Robert hadn't been at his job for long. However, we were determined and didn't give up. After trying with several mortgage companies, we finally found one that worked with us and approved our loan. We bought our dream home, which I had always imagined filled with the smell of wood, thick wooden beams on the ceiling, custom storage spaces, a kitchen tailored for my height, and spacious cypress flooring. Importantly, it was a single-story, barrier-free house, perfect for living comfortably in a wheelchair. We were excited as the house was being built and visited the construction site every day. When our carefully designed home was finished, had a large yard where my mom, who now seldom went outside, could enjoy sunbathing. However, there was a catch with the land. It was given to us by Robert's grandfather, who adored Robert. Robert's family wasn't wealthy, but when his grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, he started to distribute his assets, giving us the largest plot of land. It felt like winning the lottery, but the land was just a 10-minute walk from Robert's family home. When we told them my mother would be moving in with us, Robert's sister, Emily, laughed and said, "Why is your mother moving in too? How shameless is your family?" Robert's mother, Maria, told me, "Marrying someone different like you would bring trouble." She also harshly said it was terrible for her son to have to care for an old person and called me a curse. Even then, Robert stood up for my mother and me. He said the land was a gift from his grandfather, and no one should complain. Robert's mother and sister are really mean. It's amazing that Robert, who is so kind, comes from that family. He's like a beautiful flower that grew out of mud. Robert always says his family shows him how not to be. Robert thinks his grandfather gave us the land because he wanted us to take care of his mother in her old age. He also gave other properties away. Robert's sister got a parking lot that's a 10-minute walk from their home. It's smaller than our land but makes good money from parking fees. Honestly, I would have preferred that, but a gift is still a gift, and we are thankful. Thanks to my grandfather-in-law, we could build our house without paying for the land and used it to help get a loan. When the house was finished, we invited Robert's mother and sister's family over. The builders told us they had visited the house several times without asking us. They showed up late without apologizing and said, "This is kind of like Grandpa's house, so it's like our house too." Robert's sister came in with muddy shoes and said, "The house smells nice and doesn't need air fresheners." She and her husband walked around with muddy shoes, ignoring the slippers we offered. When I suggested they use slippers, she laughed and said, "It's too much trouble, and we could just clean the floor." The visit was uncomfortable from the start, and they didn't bring anything with them. When they saw my mother's room, which is spacious and sunny, Robert's mother said, "I would like that room." My mother's room is like a duplex with its own kitchen, almost a second living space. "I want to live here," said my mother-in-law during the third point of her conversation. She then told my mother, "You were lucky to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paralyzed, you moved from that old shack to this nice house. Isn't that a lucky turn of events?" My mother said nothing but looked very sad. I was really angry inside, but before I could say anything, Robert spoke up. "What did you just say? There are things you should and shouldn't say. It makes me question your humanity. I can't even believe you're part of my family. You're the worst. Apologize now," Robert demanded firmly. Whether they were amused or not, my mother and sister-in-law glared at me. Then my sister-in-law angrily asked Robert, "What's this all about? It's a total turn-off. It's not cool to invite people over and then be rude to them just because you built a house. You think you can act superior." The mother-in-law chimed in, "My son messed up by marrying you. You're a jinx." Robert didn't stay silent. "Enough is enough. This mess started because of your rude comments. You said the accident was a good thing and called my wife a jinx. I will not forgive that." The mother and sister-in-law looked frustrated by Robert's strong response. Then my mother, who had been watching everything, said with regret, "It's okay. I am here because of the accident, and it's true I moved from a rundown house to this beautiful one. Your son has always been kind to me." My mother apologized to Robert. "Thank you," perhaps feeling guilty, the mother and sister-in-law left, giving me a nasty look. My mother then apologized to Robert. "I'm sorry if I upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry for ruining the mood at our housewarming party." Robert responded, "No, I should be the one apologizing. It's embarrassing how they lack decency. I'm really sorry, but I am happy to be living with you." Please understand that." With that, my mother started to tear up. Since we live near Robert's parents' house, the neighbors all know us well. They've known Robert since he was a child, and are very kind to us. 4 months have passed since that day. We were finally settling into our new home, and my mother started to smile more when I received an unexpected call from home while I was at work. We rarely get calls from home, so it surprised me. My bad feeling was right. My mom, sounding very upset, called to tell me something awful. Robert had collapsed at work. I was shocked and spoke to my right away, then rushed to the hospital on the way. I tried to stay calm by imagining that Robert would be okay, joking around like always, but when I arrived, it was a shock to see him with so many tubes attached to him. We had planned to go to a movie that weekend. The doctor told me Robert was in critical condition and might not wake up. I felt like I was in a movie. I couldn't even cry. Despite my prayers, Robert passed away at the hospital. My shock continued as my mother and sister-in-law arrived when they heard Robert had died. My sister-in-law accused me harshly, asking if I had poisoned him or if I was after his life insurance. My mother-in-law also blamed me, saying bad things always happen around me and called me a jinx. I was too sad to respond. Then my own mother arrived in a caregiver's taxi, crying over Robert's death, which finally made me cry too. My mother-in-law rudely told us to stop the fake crying. She said Robert had changed because of me and that she didn't want to see us ever again. Then she left the hospital. A funeral director came to organize Robert's funeral, and we went to the funeral home. Robert had died from a brain hemorrhage, which was hard to believe since he was fine that morning. When I told my mother-in-law the funeral plans, she harshly said she wouldn't come because Robert always sided with my mother and me. She said her daughter wouldn't come either. Many of Robert's co-workers and friends came to the viewing, but neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law and her husband were there. Many attended the funeral, and it was clear that Robert was deeply loved. Many people cried for him. It was hard, but maybe this is just the kind of people his family were. I was happy to spend the whole day with those who truly missed my husband. After Robert's death, I got an email from my mother-in-law, but it was inappropriate, so I didn't reply. She was asking about the life insurance money and kept emailing because I didn't respond. Eventually, she claimed she had a right to it. I chose to ignore it because I wasn't ready to deal with that. When we got home, I noticed a light on inside, which was odd. My mother, Sarah, was confused and thought we had turned off all the lights. I figured maybe I forgot because I was so upset. I told her it was understandable, given the situation, and I unlocked the door. When we entered, we could hear the TV, which was very strange. Inside, we found my sister-in-law and her husband sitting there. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak up. The living room was full of unfamiliar furniture and boxes. We had no idea what was happening. My sister-in-law said, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let it slide. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were completely shocked. I asked where our furniture and belongings had gone, and she casually said, "A resale company came and took everything, claiming we had good furniture, and they got a good price for it. They bought new furniture with that money, saying, 'Who wants furniture that a dead person used?' It's bad luck." She added that she cared about such things and our stuff was packed in boxes. She even remarked that we must be minimalists or just poor because we had so few things. The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband and me. I couldn't forgive them for this. My mom was furious too, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to respond. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and return them. Now that my husband is gone, dealing with this was the last thing I needed. I don't want anything to do with his family, but I do want to stay in the house that's full of memories of him. While I was wrestling with these feelings, my mother quietly said to me, "What do you think Robert would say if he were here now?" "He might say we should leave." I'm sure he would. Robert often mentioned, It's good to spend time with people who understand you, but there are some people who will never understand, no matter how much you try. It's a waste of time dealing with those people. He was actually talking about his own mother and sister. I realized that if we stayed, his family would keep interfering, acting on impulse. I signed a lease for an accessible apartment. My mom was surprised by how quickly I made that decision. I asked the resale company to hold on to the furniture for a few days, and it was moved to our new apartment 3 days later. In exchange for moving out, I made my mother-in-law and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us, so a new life began for just my mother and me in the apartment. It turns out Robert had many life insurance policies, almost obsessively, so he used to joke, always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, he left enough money for my mother and me to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. Since he couldn't secure a mortgage when we bought the house, I, being employed at a major corporation, bought the house in my name. I made sure that even if something happened to Robert first, I wasn't going to keep paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. According to our agreement, the house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 4 months. Time flew by, and 4 months passed quickly. Then I started receiving a lot of calls from my sister-in-law Emily and my mother-in-law Maria. My call history was filled with their names, and it was getting scary, like something out of a horror movie. They were incredibly persistent, so I finally answered the phone. They were furious because the house was being sold. Apparently, when they tried to return to the house, they found out they couldn't get in because of a seizure notice. Emily and her husband had moved out of their apartment since Robert passed away, and Emily had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house since they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. Surprisingly, Maria had gotten so caught up in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It turns out they had been living together for the past 5 months. I also heard that they sold their main source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now Maria and Emily's family are completely homeless. When Maria said, "I'm sorry for everything. Let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we've severed ties." Maria was quiet after mumbling weakly. In my mind, I was thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? Then when I said I wouldn't lend them a single cent, Emily, who had been listening next to Maria, shouted, "You devil! Bring us the money right now." "I'm a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now," I replied and ended the call. In reality, I involved a lawyer for the past 5 months to push for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently, it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major issues, giving our family a moment of peace. We plan to find a new home with the money Robert left us since it's just my mother and me. We don't need a big house. We'd rather prioritize security as 2 women living together, so I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home: "People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where the mother-in-law can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious." With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her, so I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband probably chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Robert's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, we're moving forward. I recently bought a luxurious condominium with exceptional security features, a choice I'm sure would have comforted my always cautious husband, Robert. The peace of mind that comes from living in such a secure place is invaluable, especially after the tumultuous experiences with my in-laws. Life has taken a dramatic turn since Robert passed away. Amidst my grief, I've been dealing with the fallout from his family's actions, which frankly has been draining. Following the auction of the house, Robert's mother, Maria, and his sister found themselves without a place to live. Despite their desperate attempts, including trying to borrow money from neighbors, They couldn't secure any financial assistance and ended up in public housing. Living in public housing, they continued their old habits, causing disturbances that have started to concern the community. For instance, they recently had a barbecue on their small balcony, an act that left many locals in disbelief given the limited space and safety concerns. Such thoughtlessness seems typical of them and reflects the disregard they've always shown for others' comfort. Moreover, their financial difficulties appear to have led to frequent loud arguments that disrupt the nightly peace, an auditory testament to their ongoing strife. My sister-in-law's husband has since left, leaving just her and Maria to fend for themselves. Their situation is a stark contrast to the quiet, stable life I now lead with my mother. We're both two-person households, but while my home is a sanctuary, theirs is a source of constant conflict and unease. It's become so disruptive that neighbors are banding together, hoping to evict them to restore some semblance of peace. It's a harsh reminder that no matter where you go, being a nuisance can make you unwelcome. Reflecting on these events, I realize how the phrase, "what goes around comes around," rings true. My goal is to live quietly and peacefully, distanced from the embarrassing turmoil associated with my former family. I believe Robert watches over us, perhaps with mixed feelings about the chaos his family continues to perpetuate, in contrast to the tranquility he loved during his life. As I move forward, my focus is on living a life that causes no trouble to others. I want to honor Robert's memory, not just through words but through actions. He always advocated for a life well lived, surrounded by people who bring joy and understanding. Despite the unfortunate family dynamics he left behind, I'm committed to building a life filled with positivity and peace. The decision to buy this condominium wasn't just about finding a new home. It was about creating a haven where my mother and I could feel safe and secure. The quiet, the order, and the absence of drama allow us to enjoy each other's company and focus on the things that truly matter. It's smaller than our previous house, but every corner of this new space is cherished, every moment of silence savored. I've learned a lot about resilience and moving forward. The memories of Robert, filled with love and laughter, inspire me every day. They remind me of the importance of living authentically and compassionately, ensuring that his spirit of kindness is carried forward. Living well is perhaps the best tribute I can offer to a man who gave so much and asked for so little in return. In this new chapter, amidst the serenity of our chosen sanctuary, I am determined to live not just for myself but in a way that would make Robert proud. I am Jessica, a 37-year-old housewife. I have been married to my husband, a company employee named Richard, for 12 years, and we have a daughter in elementary school. Since my husband works for a trading company and travels frequently, it was tough when our daughter was small, but my doting husband frequently called us via video from his business trips, so our daughter adored her father, and I didn't feel lonely. We were a happy family of 3. However, even in such a peaceful daily life, I sometimes felt depressed. One mom friend constantly harassed me. This mom friend, named Sarah, lived in the same apartment, and our children went to the same kindergarten. We were on the PTA together and had been close for a long time, but something caused her to start hating me. I tried hard to mend our relationship, but her harassment only escalated. One day, she set a terrifying trap for me. The trigger for Sarah's hostility was when we bought a house. We had been living in the same rental housing as her, but when our daughter started elementary school, we purchased a new single-family home. We stretched a bit, but living there, we felt it was the right decision. The new house was in an excellent location, close to a supermarket and the station. It also had a large yard where our daughter could play freely. I was grateful to my hardworking husband and determined to work even harder on housework and childcare. But Sarah didn't like that. She suddenly became cold when we moved. At first, I was confused as I didn't understand why she had changed. We used to visit each other's homes frequently, but she began ignoring my greetings and sometimes glared at me with hatred. I finally understood the reason during our children's entrance ceremony when I had a chance to talk to her after the ceremony. As I was leaving the school, she whispered in my ear, "Just because you bought a house, you think you're better than everyone else. You're such a smug woman." Then she said, "I thought you were my friend, but I'm disappointed," and walked away. Being hated by someone I considered a friend was shocking. I had never boasted about our new home and wanted to stay friends even after our children started elementary school, so I tried to mend our relationship by smiling and talking to her, but her attitude didn't change. She even started spreading false rumors among other mom friends, saying I was getting arrogant after buying a house and looking down on those who don't own a house. Fortunately, no one believed her, and some friends sympathized with me, saying it's tough having someone like that targeting you. Though the other moms were sensible, I was always anxious about when Sarah might spread another rumor. Even though I spent restless days, luckily, my daughter's elementary school had a large number of students, so our children never ended up in the same class, and eventually, Sarah stopped bothering me. By the time my daughter was in 3rd grade, I had completely forgotten about Sarah and regained a peaceful life. But I had underestimated her tenacity. She had been secretly plotting something terrible. One morning, I was cleaning the house after sending my daughter to school. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. When I answered the intercom, I saw 2 uniformed men on the monitor. A police car was parked in front of the house. "Why are the police here?" I was startled but calmed myself, thinking maybe there was an incident in the neighborhood, and they were here for an inquiry. I told myself, "It's okay, there's nothing to panic about," and slowly opened the front door. One of the officers asked, "Is your husband at home?" It seemed they weren't here for me but for my husband. I started to explain that he wasn't home. "My husband is not at home," but then the officer's next words shocked me so much that I almost felt my heart stop. The officer said, "Your husband is suspected of molestation." "My husband is suspected of molestation." I shouted involuntarily but quickly covered my mouth with both hands. If the neighbors found out my husband was suspected of molestation, it would be a disaster. The police said a woman had accused him of touching her inappropriately on a train, but my husband could never do such a thing, so I insisted there must be a mistake. However, the officer said, "If you hide him, you'll be arrested too." I was at a loss, knowing my husband was innocent, when a woman appeared from behind the officers. It was Sarah, smirking as she watched us. I thought she was just being a nosy onlooker, but she wasn't. Ignoring the officers, she barged into the house and said, "If you don't want him arrested, I might consider settling for some compensation money." Apparently, it was Sarah who reported my husband for molestation. The officers seemed troubled by her sudden mention of a settlement, but she continued, "I was really scared at that time," and began describing the molestation incident with a pained expression. According to her, she was on a train when someone suddenly touched her. She almost screamed but recognized the face of the perpetrator, my husband. She thought about turning him over to the station staff but hesitated since he was her friend's husband. Before she could decide, he disappeared into the crowd at the next station, so she decided to report it to the police later. Then, with tearful eyes and trembling, she pointed at me. "Molestation is a heinous crime, officer. Arrest this woman too." Indeed, if she had actually been molested, her fear and desire to catch the perpetrator would be understandable, and if I were hiding the criminal, I might be just as guilty. But her case was different. It's clear my husband couldn't have committed the molestation, to fabricate a crime and even act poorly about it. What is she thinking? I resolved to thoroughly expose this lying woman. "All right, time to get serious. I won't hold back," I said to the officers. "I'm sorry to trouble you by coming all the way here. My husband has been overseas on assignment for 3 years." "What? Overseas?" The officers were dumbfounded. Actually, he had been away from the country for 3 long years. Just after we built our new home, he was ordered by his company to work overseas. The moment I heard about it from him, my world went dark. It's common to hear about people being transferred right after buying a house, but his assignment was overseas. Moreover, it wasn't a country we could easily travel to, and this time, it seemed like a long-term assignment, unlike his usual business trips. Although I was used to him being away due to his frequent overseas trips, I was deeply disappointed since our dream home was just completed. However, we couldn't refuse the company's order. I considered moving overseas with our family, but since our daughter had already completed her school enrollment and she had many close friends in the neighborhood, she said, "I want to go to school with my friends." So I decided to stay in the country with our daughter. As soon as we moved into the new house, we started living as just the two of us. Living alone in a large house was initially quite unsettling. However, we communicated with him through video calls almost daily, and thanks to the spacious new home, I was able to enjoy my hobby of gardening, so it wasn't as lonely as I had expected. That's why he has never lived in our new home, having gone overseas 3 years ago, so it's absolutely impossible for my husband to have committed any groping on a domestic train. Right when I said this, both police officers looked puzzled and tilted their heads. Naturally, the most flustered person upon hearing this was the other woman. She exclaimed, "That's a lie. It must be a lie that your husband is overseas. I definitely saw him with my own eyes. The culprit is definitely your husband." Her face turned bright red as she shouted. I was boiling with anger at her for still accusing my husband of groping at this point, but with the police involved, proving his innocence was the most important thing, so I said calmly, "Shall I call my husband directly then?" and took out my smartphone from my apron pocket. There was a high chance he wouldn't be able to answer if he was working, but it was nighttime where he was, just around the end of his workday. The police officers still looked troubled, and she had a strained look on her face, but I went ahead and called him on video as I prayed, "Please pick up the phone." My prayers were answered when he responded immediately. Seeing his face, I felt relieved and told him everything, that he was being accused of groping, that one of my friends was claiming he had touched her on a train. Initially baffled by the sudden mention of groping, he listened to my story with a frown, but once he saw the police on the video call, he quickly understood the situation. He spoke to the officers, "As you can see, I'm not in the country, so I couldn't have committed groping." Then he moved the phone away from his face to show the scenery outside his window. The screen displayed an exotic cityscape and a dark sky, clearly indicating a foreign country. It was obviously not a domestic scene. He then said, "If necessary, I can show you my passport. I've been abroad for 3 years." He took out his passport from a nearby bag and showed the stamped pages. He continued, "If you still don't believe me, you can investigate further if you like." The police officer, looking apologetic, said, "No, that's quite all right. Thank you for your cooperation." When I ended the video call, the officer turned to the other woman with a stern face. "So what is the meaning of this?" Having witnessed the interaction, she was already pale with wide eyes. She stammered, but I didn't know her husband was overseas. "I definitely saw him." Her voice trembled. It was practically a confession. I stepped closer to her and demanded, "Then why did you think it was my husband? You said you saw him with your own eyes, right? Don't tell me it was a case of mistaken identity." She snapped back, "It's all your fault," she yelled, even as the officers looked on in astonishment. "You bought a house and acted all high and mighty. Who do you think you are? I thought we were apartment buddies, but you betrayed me. I wanted to make you suffer, so I framed your husband." She ranted furiously. Her selfish words left me and the officers speechless. Holding a grudge because I now own a house, she tried to frame my husband for groping, hoping to get settlement money. This was beyond harassment. Fortunately, since he was abroad, we avoided a false accusation, but if he had been in the country and on that train, it could have been disastrous. I've heard that proving innocence is very difficult once accused of groping. False accusations are absolutely unacceptable. However, she didn't understand the gravity of her actions. Despite her rage, she suddenly put on a casual face and said, "Well, let's say it was my mistake this time. I just wanted to teach a cheeky woman a lesson. I was infuriated by her blatant disregard for decency. "We'll see who gets punished," I said. "What did you say?" she screeched, grabbing at me again, but the police officers restrained her and took her away. Sometime later, her husband came to apologize. He told me that she was arrested for a false accusation and given a suspended sentence. He had been concerned about her badmouthing me but never imagined she would falsely accuse my husband. He was deeply shocked. Tearing up, he apologized profusely. He also declared that he would divorce her. Apparently, she constantly nagged him to earn more and complained about their apartment. He had grown tired of her, and this incident was the last straw. She was now completely alone with no job history and a criminal record. She would struggle in society, but that was her own doing. I was mostly worried about her child, but I learned that the child was now with the grandparents and attending school happily, which was a relief. As for me, nearly having my husband framed by a jealous friend was a close call. Recently, he told me he might return soon. My daughter and I are eagerly awaiting his return, and we plan to continue living happily in our beloved home.